She recognized the scar before she recognized his face. That was the thing. 12 years had changed the face. The jaw was different. The eyes were the same color but sitting differently now. The way eyes sat differently in a face that had been through things. The hair was shorter. There were lines she didn't remember. But the scar, the small L shape beside his right index finger, that hadn't changed. That was exactly as she remembered it. From the afternoon he was 8 years old and she was 4. And he'd cut his hand on a piece of broken glass trying to force open a stuck door so she wouldn't get locked out in the rain. She'd been 4 years old. She still remembered the sound he'd made when the glass broke. She still remembered the blood on the white door frame. She still remembered him saying, "It's okay, Sarah. It's okay," while his hand was bleeding because he was 8 years old and she was 4. And even then, he was that kind of person who said, "It's okay," when he was the one who was hurt. She was holding a coffee pot. She was standing at booth 7. She was looking at her brother's hand. Her brother who had been missing for 12 years. Her brother who had left a note that said, "Don't look for me," and whom she had looked for anyway. Quietly, continuously, the way you looked for someone when you didn't know how to stop. Her brother who did not know she was standing 3 feet away. Or did. She couldn't tell. She couldn't tell because he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the menu. Stay with me. Subscribe if you're new, because what he does in the next 30 seconds changes everything. She didn't move. She didn't say his name. She waited. And then he looked up. She'd stopped counting at some point. Not the years. She knew the years. 12. She knew it the way she knew her own birthday, the way she knew her mother's phone number, the way she knew certain things that had become part of the architecture of her life without her choosing them. She'd stopped counting the days she'd looked for him. In the beginning, she'd counted. Day 1, day 7, day 30. She'd kept a notebook. Phone numbers she'd called. Places she'd gone. Descriptions she'd given to people who'd looked at her with the specific, careful sympathy of someone receiving information they didn't expect to be useful. She'd stopped the notebook at 8 months. Not because she'd stopped looking. Because the notebook had started to feel like evidence that he wasn't coming back. And she wasn't ready to have evidence of that. The note had said 3 things. "I need to go. I'll be back when I'm better. Don't look for me." She'd read it, standing in the doorway of his apartment. She'd had a key, had always had a key, the specific, practical closeness of a sister and brother who lived 4 blocks apart and checked in on each other with the frequency of people who understood that checking in was its own form of love. She'd read it 3 times. Then she'd sat on his floor. She'd sat there for 2 hours before she called their mother. She'd needed the 2 hours to understand what she was going to say. She'd never fully understood it. She still hadn't. Their father had not talked about Daniel after the first year. Not from cruelty, from the specific protective mechanism of a man who had learned that talking about something he couldn't fix made the unfixable thing larger. He'd closed the subject the way he'd closed other subjects that were too painful to leave open. Not with anger, with the deliberate, careful silence of someone who had decided that survival required certain doors to stay shut. He died 4 years ago. Heart attack. Tuesday morning. He'd been making breakfast. She'd been the one to find him. She'd sat with him on the kitchen floor, the same way she'd sat on Daniel's apartment floor 12 years before, waiting for the moment to be different, understanding slowly that it wasn't going to be. She'd thought about Daniel at the funeral, about whether he knew, about whether he was somewhere being the person he'd be when he was better, and whether better had happened, and whether he'd decided that coming back was no longer possible even if better had happened, because too much time had passed and the distance had become its own kind of wall. She'd thought about all of it. She'd had nowhere to put it. She'd put it in the place where she kept things that didn't have anywhere to go. Her mother still set a place for him, not every night, on his birthday. March 14th, every year. Linda Chen would make the dinner Daniel had liked when he was young, the specific particular meal of a mother who had decided that forgetting what her son liked to eat was a form of giving up she wasn't willing to do. Dumplings. Scallion pancakes. The soup with the pork and the tofu that had taken her 2 days to make when they were children, and that she still made the same way, refusing the shortcuts that would have produced something similar, but not the same. She'd make the meal. She'd set the place. She'd sit at the table. She'd eat her portion. She'd cover his. She'd leave it covered until morning. Sarah had sat at that table every March 14th for 12 years. She'd never said, "Mom, he's not coming." Because she didn't know that, and because saying it would have cost something she couldn't afford to cost her mother. She'd moved in 3 years ago. Not because she couldn't afford her own place. She could, barely, the specific arithmetic of a waitress's income in a city that kept getting more expensive. Because her mother was 64 and alone, and because the apartment was large enough for 2 people, and because some distances felt wrong when the reason for them had dissolved. Her father was gone. Daniel was gone. She was what was left. She'd moved in. Her mother had said, "You don't have to." She'd said, "I know." She'd moved in anyway. She'd been working the morning shift at the diner for 4 years. Not because it was the job she'd planned. She hadn't planned a job specifically, had planned other things that had not happened in the way she'd expected, and had arrived at waitressing the way people arrived at things that weren't plans. Through a sequence of practical decisions that had each made sense in the moment and had accumulated into a life. She didn't mind it. There was something she liked about the work, the specific kinetic satisfaction of a job where you could see what you'd done at the end of it. Tables filled and emptied. People fed. Coffee poured and poured and poured. She'd learned to read people in 4 years. Not their orders, them. The couple in booth 3 who were not going to work it out no matter how long they sat there. The man at the counter who came every Tuesday and always ordered the same thing and always left a tip that was too large for the bill and whom she'd decided was paying for the company as much as the food. She'd gotten good at seeing things other people didn't see. She hadn't expected to see what she saw this morning. Booth 7 had been empty when she'd looked up from refilling the counter coffee at 8:43. At 8:47, it wasn't. She'd picked up the coffee pot. She'd walked over. She'd been running through the morning in the part of her brain that ran the morning automatically. 3 tables that needed checking, a new order for booth 2, the specific practiced management of a shift that was busy but not overwhelming. She'd gotten to booth 7. She'd looked at the man sitting there. At his face first, the automatic reading she did with every customer, the quick assessment of mood and readiness. The face was unfamiliar. She'd looked down at the menu he was holding, at his hands, at the right hand, at the scar beside his right index finger, the small L shape, the specific, particular shape of a cut made by broken glass on a Tuesday afternoon. In 1994, when a boy who was 8 years old had forced open a stuck door so his 4-year-old sister wouldn't get locked out in the rain. Her brain did something she didn't have a word for. Not recognition exactly. Certainty. The specific physical certainty of someone whose body understood something before their mind had caught up. She stopped moving. The coffee pot was in her hand. The morning was continuing around her. She was not continuing with it. She was standing at booth 7, looking at a scar she had last seen when she was 4 years old. And she was absolutely certain. He felt her stop. Not saw, felt. The specific peripheral awareness of someone who had spent 12 years learning to read the air around him, to notice shifts in atmosphere before they became events. A skill you developed when you'd lived the way he'd lived. When you'd needed to know what was coming before it arrived. She'd stopped moving. He could feel it. He kept his eyes on the menu. The menu was a single laminated page. Breakfast items on the left, lunch on the right, the specific unhurried permanence of a diner menu that hadn't changed in years. He could see every item without reading them. He wasn't reading them. He was deciding. He'd come in because of the rain. Portland rain, the specific, persistent kind that didn't announce itself dramatically, but simply arrived and stayed, the rain of a city that had made its peace with being wet and expected you to do the same. He'd been walking to a job site 3 blocks away. He'd forgotten his rain jacket. He'd ducked into the first door he'd seen. The diner. He'd been in Portland for 3 years. He'd never come to this part of the city. He'd had no reason to come to this part of the city. He had no reason to be here right now except rain and a forgotten jacket and the specific, arbitrary logic of a morning that had made one small decision for him without asking. He'd sat down. He'd picked up the menu. He'd felt her stop. He hadn't looked up immediately. He'd needed a moment, not to decide whether it was her. He'd known it was her from the sound of her footsteps stopping, not from her face, not from her voice, from the quality of the stopping, the specific, sudden stillness of someone whose body had registered something before their mind had caught up. He'd heard that stillness. He'd known it, because he'd been the person who caused that stillness before. When they were children and he'd come home late and she'd been waiting. When he was 20 and she was 16 and he'd shown up at her school because their mother had called him and said Sarah wasn't answering her phone. He'd always been able to feel when Sarah had stopped. 12 years hadn't changed that. He'd looked at his hand, at the scar. He knew what she'd seen. He'd forgotten about the scar the way you forgot about things that had always been there. Not completely, just moved them to the periphery where they lived without demanding attention. It was part of his hand. It had been part of his hand for 30 years. He didn't think about it. He was thinking about it now. He was thinking about the afternoon it had happened. She'd been 4 years old. He'd been 8. The door to the backyard had swollen in the rain and stuck, and Sarah had been outside and he'd been inside, and she'd been knocking on the glass and trying not to cry because she was 4, and crying felt like failing, and even at 4, Sarah had not liked failing. He'd forced the door. The glass panel had cracked. His hand had gone through it. He'd looked at the blood, and then he'd looked at Sarah's face on the other side of the door, wet, scared, looking at his hand, and he'd said it's okay because she was 4, and the only thing that mattered was that she didn't cry. She hadn't cried. He had. Later, privately, when she was in the other room and their mother was bandaging his hand. He'd been 8 years old, and he'd needed to cry, and he'd needed to not do it in front of his 4-year-old sister. Some things didn't change. He thought about walking out. Not running, walking. The specific, deliberate exit of someone who had decided that a situation was not for them and was removing themselves from it without drama. He'd gotten good at that over the years. The calibrated exit. The clean disappearance. He knew how to do it. He could do it now. She hadn't said his name. She wasn't certain. Or if she was certain, she was giving him space to pretend she wasn't. Which was the thing Sarah had always done. The specific generosity of someone who understood that some people needed the door to be open before they could walk through it. She was giving him the door. He could walk out instead. He'd walked out before. He thought about his mother. Not his life in Portland, his mother. Linda Chen, on a Tuesday evening 12 years ago, walking into her son's apartment because her daughter had called her, sitting on the floor in the specific collapsed way of a woman receiving news that restructured everything she'd understood about her life. He hadn't seen it. He'd imagined it 10,000 times. He'd imagined his father getting the news. He'd imagined Sarah on the floor first. He'd imagined all of it from the specific removing distance of someone who had decided that his absence was better than his presence, and had never fully stopped questioning whether he'd been right. He thought about his father. He'd heard about it. He'd been in Seattle when it happened. A different life, a different name, the early years of learning to be a person who wasn't drowning. Someone he'd worked with had mentioned it in passing, a name in a local newspaper, the small obituary notice of a man named Thomas Chen, survived by his wife Linda and daughter Sarah. Not his son. Not survived by his son. He'd read that and understood what it meant. Not that his father had given up on him, that his father had run out of time. He'd been in Seattle. He hadn't gone. He'd sat with that for 4 years. He was still sitting with it. He looked up. Not dramatically. He just looked up. The way you looked up when you'd made a decision and the decision was made and there was nothing left to do except be present for what came next. She was standing at the booth, coffee pot in her right hand, her left hand at her side. Her face was doing something he recognized, not from photographs, from memory. The specific, contained expression Sarah made when she was trying not to show what she was feeling, because she decided that showing it would make something harder for someone else. She'd been making that face since she was 4 years old. He'd been the someone else most of the time. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Hi, Sarah," he said. 2 words, 12 years. Her face did the thing it had been holding back. Not crying, something quieter. The specific physical release of someone who had been carrying a question for 12 years and had just received the answer. She put the coffee pot on the table. She sat down across from him. She didn't say anything, neither did him. They just sat. In booth 7, in a diner in Portland, on a Tuesday morning in November. While the rain continued outside and the diner continued around them, and 12 years sat between them like something that needed to be looked at before it could be put anywhere. If this kind of story stays with you, subscribe. We tell stories about the people who find each other when they weren't looking. Share this tonight. He was the one who spoke first. "How's Mom?" he said. She looked at him. She told him. She told him about their father first. Not because it was the most important thing, because it was the thing she needed to say before she could say anything else. The thing that had been sitting at the front of everything for 4 years. The specific, unresolved weight of a loss that had 2 layers. Losing her father and not being able to tell her brother. She told him plainly, the way she told hard things. "Dad died 4 years ago," she said. "Heart attack Tuesday morning. He was making breakfast." Daniel was very still. She watched him receive it. Not with the dramatic collapse she'd sometimes imagined. In the versions she'd played out in her head over the years, the imaginary conversations where she finally got to say the things she'd been saving. In those versions he reacted largely, cried, said something. He didn't do any of that. He just went still. The specific, total stillness of someone absorbing something that couldn't be unabsorbed. She waited. She was good at waiting. "Tuesday," he said finally. "What time?" he said. She looked at him. "Why does the time matter?" she said. He looked at the table. "I don't know," he said. "It doesn't." A pause. "I just wanted to know what I was doing." She understood. She'd done the same thing when her father died. Reconstructed the hours before. Tried to locate herself in the timeline, as if knowing what she'd been doing when it happened would make the happening make more sense. It hadn't made more sense. It didn't for Daniel either. But she told him. "Around 7:15, she said. "In the morning." He nodded, looked at his hands, at the scar. "I was in Seattle," he said. "When it happened. I saw it in the paper." She looked at him, she said. "Yes," he said. "And you didn't." She stopped. She'd promised herself she wasn't going to do this. Wasn't going to lead with the 12 years of questions she'd accumulated. Wasn't going to make this first conversation the place where she put everything she'd been carrying. He was here. He was sitting across from her. That was what mattered. The rest could wait. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "That's it?" he said. "Okay?" "For now," she said. "Yes." He looked at her for a long moment. The specific look of someone who had expected more and was recalibrating what to do with less. "I didn't go," he said. "To the funeral. I want you to know I know that." "I know you know," she said. "I couldn't, Daniel," she said. He stopped. She hadn't used his name yet. They both registered it. "I'm not doing the why yet," she said. "I'm not ready for the why yet." She looked at him. "Are you okay? Right now. Are you okay?" He looked at her, at his sister, who had been looking for him for 12 years and had found him in a diner on a Tuesday morning because of rain and a forgotten jacket and a scar she'd been carrying in her memory since she was 4 years old. "I'm better," he said. Yes, I'm better." She nodded. "Good," she said. She meant it. Marcus came by at 9:10. He didn't say anything. He looked at Sarah. He looked at the man across from her. He read the table the way people read tables when they'd been working with someone long enough to know when something significant was happening and when to stay out of it. He picked up the coffee pot she'd left on the table. He went back to the counter. He covered her remaining tables without being asked. She noted it. She'd thank him later. "How long have you been in Portland?" she said. 3 years, Daniel said. She looked at him. 3 years, she said. "Yes," he said. She thought about 3 years. About the specific geography of Portland. The way the city folded into itself, the neighborhoods that felt like separate worlds, the way you could live in one part of it and never encounter another part. She thought about whether they'd been in the same city for 3 years, whether she'd walked past him somewhere, whether he'd seen her. "Did you know I was here?" she said. "No," he said. "I didn't know any of you were still in Portland." "Mom never left," Sarah said. "I know that now," he said. "When did you know?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "About a year after I got here," he said. I looked you up, online." "Not to? I just needed to know you were okay." She looked at him. "You knew we were here," she said. "Yes," he said. "For 2 years," she said. "Yes," he said. She sat with that. 2 years of him knowing. 2 years of being in the same city. 2 years of, what? Driving the same streets. Breathing the same rain. Why didn't you? She stopped herself again. "Not yet." "Sorry," she said. "I said I wasn't going to do the why yet." "You can," he said. "I owe you the why." "You do," she said. "But I want to ask it when I can actually hear the answer." She looked at him. "Right now I'm still here." He looked at her. "Here," he said. "In the part where you're real," she said. "Where you're actually sitting across from me. I need to be in that part for a little while before I go to the other parts." He was quiet. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. She asked him small things. Not small like unimportant, small like specific. The kind of questions that built a person out of 12 years of absence. "What do you do?" she said. "Contractor," he said. "Mostly residential. Kitchens, bathrooms, some larger projects." "You learned that," she said. "In stages," he said. "Started as a laborer. Learned while I worked." "You were always good with your hands," she said. He looked at the scar. "Sometimes too good," he said. She almost smiled. It was the first thing that felt like them. The specific, dry humor that had been the register of their relationship when they were young, before everything had gotten heavy. She held on to it.
Do you have she started?
"Are you alone?" he said. "If that's what you're asking." "I wasn't going to ask it like that," she said. "I know," he said. "The answer is, I have people, not I have a life. It's a small life." He paused, "But it's mine." She looked at him. At 38 years old, sitting across from her in a booth in Portland on a Tuesday morning. At the jaw that was different, and the eyes that were the same, and the scar that was exactly as she'd remembered. At her brother. "Are you clean?" she said. He didn't flinch. 8 years, he said. She nodded. She said, "The first 3 were, I believe you," she said. "You don't have to?" "I want to," he said. "I want you to know it wasn't. The leaving wasn't because I didn't." He stopped. "I'm not going to be able to say this right the first time." "That's okay," she said. "You'll have more than one time." He looked at her. At the specific, unguarded thing she'd just said. The assumption embedded in it. More than one time. Like that was already decided. Like she'd decided it the moment she sat down. "Sarah," he said. "Yeah," she said. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Neither do I," she said. "We'll figure it out." It's not. It's not going to be easy." "I know," she said. 12 years, he said. "I know," she said. "Dad," he said. "I know," she said. "Mom," she looked at him. At the word. At what was inside it. "I know," she said. "We'll get there." He looked at his hands. At the scar. At 12 years in the shape of an L beside his right index finger. "Tell me about her," he said. "Mom, tell me what she's like now." And Sarah did. She told him the true version. Not the version she told people who asked how her mother was doing. That version was, "She's good, she keeps busy, she has her garden." The social version. The version that was accurate in its facts and incomplete in everything else. She told him the true version because he'd earned it, not by showing up. He hadn't earned anything yet by showing up, by asking. By saying, "Tell me what she's like now," with the specific, careful weight of someone who understood that now was different from then and wanted to know the difference. "She still makes your birthday dinner," Sarah said. He looked at her. "Every year," Sarah said. "March 14th. Dumplings, scallion pancakes, the soup." He was very still. "She sets your place," Sarah said. "Covers the food. Leaves it until morning." The booth was quiet. Outside, the rain had not stopped. Inside the diner, the morning continued. Orders called, plates set down, the ambient noise of a place doing what it did. Daniel was looking at the table. 12 years, he said. 12 years, Sarah said. He looked up. His eyes were dry. She'd expected that too. Daniel had always cried privately. Is she? He started. How is she? Actually. Sarah thought about it. About how to say true things about a person you loved without making the true things sound worse than they were or better than they were. She's smaller, Sarah said. Not physically, she's the same size, but she takes up less space than she used to. Like she's been careful about not expanding too much into a life that might have to contract again. Daniel looked at her. She laughs, Sarah said. I want you to know that. She laughs at things. She has friends from the garden club. She has a routine that she likes. She paused. She's not broken. She's just been living carefully. Because of me, he said. Because of a lot of things, Sarah said. Dad, you. The specific accumulation of losses that a person carries when they've been living long enough to accumulate them. He was quiet. Don't make yourself the whole reason, Sarah said. You're a reason. You're not the whole reason. He looked at her. That's generous, he said. It's accurate, she said. She told him about the garden. Linda had started it the year after Thomas died. Not the year Daniel left, the year Thomas died. A specificity that mattered. She'd needed something to tend. Something that responded to attention. Something that didn't disappear. She'd started with tomatoes, then herbs, then the flower beds along the back fence that had expanded every spring until they were what you noticed first when you came through the gate. She knew every plant by name. She talked to them. Sarah had caught her doing it once, standing in the garden in the early morning before she thought anyone was awake, talking quietly to a rose bush she'd planted the spring before. She'd asked her about it later. Linda had said, plants grow better when someone talks to them. Sarah had said, is that true? Linda had said, it's true for me. Daniel listened to this. He didn't say anything. She could see him filing it. The same way she filed things. The same way their father had filed things. The specific, quiet archiving of a family that processed through accumulation rather than expression. Does she talk about me? He said. No, Sarah said. He looked at her. Not because she's not thinking about you, Sarah said. She never talks about the things she can't resolve. She thinks about them constantly and talks about them never. Like Dad, he said. Like Dad, she said. I got that from both of them, he said. I know, she said. I watched you do it your whole life. He looked at the table. I thought I was protecting people, he said, when I didn't talk about things. I know, she said. I was actually just not talking about things, she said. Yes, he said. I know, she said. I did it too. For different reasons. He looked at her. What were yours? He said. She thought about it. About the specific, particular silence she'd maintained for 12 years. The not saying Daniel's name in certain company, the not explaining fully when people asked about her family, the not letting herself finish the sentence that started with, if he's okay. I didn't want to make him more gone, she said, by talking about him like he was gone. Daniel looked at her. She looked back. He's sorry, she said. You. Don't apologize, he said. I understand. They sat with that. The specific, honest discomfort of two people looking at the ways they'd both been silent and understanding that the silence had been its own form of conversation. She's going to need time, Sarah said. Mom, he said. Yes. I know, he said. I'm not Sarah started. I'm not telling you that as a warning. I'm telling you because I want you to be ready. She's going to need time and she won't be angry. She's never angry. A pause. She's going to cry. And she's going to try not to. And it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever watched. He looked at her. I know, he said. Do you? She said. No, he said. Probably not. But I know her. You knew her, Sarah said. 12 years. He said. She looked at him. She still hums when she cooks, Sarah said. The same songs. She still reads before bed. She's still her. She's just been living carefully. She paused. She's still the person you left. He looked at her. At the thing embedded in that sentence. She's still the person you left. Not nice, fine. Not she forgives you. Not it's going to be okay. She's still the person you left. Which meant she was worth coming back to. Which meant you didn't wait too long. Which meant there was still time. He understood all of it. He didn't say any of it. Some things you just received. What do I do? He said. About what? Sarah said. About, he gestured. All of it. You don't do all of it, she said. You do the next thing. What's the next thing? He said. She looked at him, at her brother. At 38 years old, sitting in a booth in Portland asking what came next. She thought about what came next. About her mother in the apartment 4 miles away, probably in the garden, right now despite the rain. Because Linda Chen did not let rain stop the garden. About March 14th. About 12 covered plates. About dumplings and scallion pancakes and soup that took 2 days. About a place set at a table. About the specific, patient love of a woman who had decided that keeping a place set was not foolishness. It was faith. Let me call her, Sarah said. Daniel looked at her. Now? He said. Not yet, Sarah said. I need to talk to you first. But today. She looked at him. Is that okay? He looked at the rain, at the diner, at his sister across the table. At 12 years sitting between them like something that needed to be looked at before anything else could happen. Yes, he said. Okay, she said. She reached across the table. She put her hand over his. She hadn't planned to do that. She did it anyway. He looked at her hand. He didn't move his. Yeah, he said. We missed you, she said. Not past tense. Not we missed you when you were gone. Present tense. We missed you. Like the missing was still happening. Like the missing was something you did continuously, rather than something that ended when the person came back. He looked at her hand on his. I know, he said. His voice had something in it she recognized. The thing that came before crying, in people who didn't cry easily. She didn't say anything else. She just kept her hand there. He'd been David Park for 11 years. Not from the beginning. The first year he'd been no one in particular. A man with cash and a backpack moving through cities the way water moved through cracks. Finding the path of least resistance, stopping where the stopping made sense, and moving on when it didn't. Seattle first. Then Spokane. Then a town in Idaho he didn't have a name for in his memory. Just a motel and a diner and a construction site where a man named Gene had looked at him for 30 seconds and said, "Can you work?" And he'd said yes, and Gene had handed him a hammer. Gene hadn't asked his name for 3 days. On the 4th day he'd asked. Daniel had said David. He didn't know why he'd said David. It was his middle name. He'd been Daniel David Chen his whole life, and he'd said David because it was true enough and far enough, and the man asking didn't need the whole thing. Park had come later. A practical decision. He'd needed ID for a job that paid real money, the kind of money that required paperwork. A man he'd worked with in Spokane had known someone who knew someone. He didn't think about the ethics of it anymore. He'd thought about them at the time and decided that survival had its own ethics and that he was still in the survival part. He'd stayed in the survival part longer than he'd expected. The addiction had started before he left. He'd known that even when he was in it, known that the drinking had been happening for 2 years before the leaving, and that the leaving and the drinking were not the same thing, but were related. The way weather was related to the seasons, one producing contingency for the other, without being the direct cause. He'd known. He hadn't stopped. The specific logic of addiction was that knowing and stopping were in different rooms, and the door between them was heavier than people understood from the outside. He'd spent 4 years learning how heavy the door was. He'd spent 8 years learning how to live on the other side of it. Not without effort. Not without the specific daily maintenance of someone who understood that the door could open in both directions and that the only thing keeping it closed on the right side was attention. He paid attention. Every day. He'd been paying attention for 8 years. He thought about the note sometimes. I'll be back when I'm better. He'd meant it when he wrote it. He'd believed better was a destination, a place you arrived at and then were. He'd understood it differently now. Better wasn't a destination, it was a practice, a daily decision, the specific ongoing work of being a person who was getting better rather than a person who had gotten better and could stop working. He'd arrived at better somewhere around year 4. He'd understood he couldn't go back somewhere around year 5. Not because of the time, because of what the time had contained, the things he'd done to fund the drinking in years 1 through 4, the people he'd let down, the specific accumulated weight of 4 years of being someone he didn't want to be. He'd gotten clean. He'd gotten a job. He'd gotten a life. He'd decided the life needed to stay separate from the before life. Because the before life contained people who deserved better than what he'd been in years 1 through 4. He'd been protecting them. He'd been protecting himself. He hadn't known which one was more true and had stopped trying to figure it out somewhere around year 7. He thought about his father every day, not all day, in the specific recurring way that people thought about the dead when the dead had unfinished business with them. A moment in the morning sometimes, a moment when he was working and his hands were doing something and his mind was free. He thought about Thomas Chen, about the specific, quiet way his father had moved through the world, not large, not loud, the steady presence of someone who believed that showing up was the whole thing and had shown up every day for as long as Daniel could remember. He'd read the obituary in a Seattle coffee shop. He'd read it 3 times. He'd put his phone down. He'd ordered another coffee. He'd sat there for 2 hours. He hadn't cried in the coffee shop. He'd gone home. The apartment he'd had in Seattle, small, the first place he'd rented with his own money under his own name, David Park on the lease, and he'd sat on the floor and he'd cried for a long time. Not for his father specifically. For the version of things where he'd come back before, where he'd been there, where his father had known. That version hadn't happened. He'd cried for it anyway. Portland had been practical. Work had brought him. A contractor he'd been doing jobs for, in Seattle, had a large project in Portland, had asked him to come down for 6 months, had offered a rate that made the move make sense. He'd come. 6 months had become a year. A year had become 3. He'd looked up his family online about a year in, not to contact them. He'd told himself not to contact them, had built an argument over years for why contact would hurt more than help, had convinced himself of it well enough that he almost believed it. To know Sarah was okay, to know his mother was okay. He'd found them. Portland, same city. He'd sat with that for a week. He'd added distance to his morning routes. He'd avoided their part of the city. He'd told himself it was enough to know they were okay. It wasn't enough. He'd known it wasn't enough. He'd done it anyway. "Can I ask you something?" he said. They'd been quiet for a few minutes, the comfortable quiet of two people who had run out of the easy things and were resting before the harder ones. "Yes," Sarah said. He said, "Don't look for me." "Did you?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "For how long?" he said. "I stopped counting," she said. He looked at her. "I stopped the active part, the notebook, the calls." She paused. "But I never stopped the other part." "What's the other part?" he said. She thought about how to say it. "The part where you look at every face in a crowd," she said. "Just in case. The part where you see someone from behind with the same walk and your heart does something before your brain catches up." She looked at him. "The part that happened 20 minutes ago at booth 7. He looked at his scar. "I told you not to," he said. "I know," she said. "Why didn't you?" "Daniel," she said. He stopped. "You told me not to look for you," she said. "You didn't tell me how to stop." He was quiet. He looked at the table, at his hands, at the scar she'd been carrying in her memory for 30 years. "I'm sorry," he said. Not the general sorry of someone acknowledging that things had gone wrong. The specific sorry of someone who understood exactly what they were sorry for and was saying it directly. 2 words, carrying 12 years, she received them. "I know," she said. "That's not enough," he said. "No," she said, "but it's where we start." He looked at her. At 34 years old, sitting across from him, in a booth in a diner, where she worked, having found him by a scar she remembered from when she was 4, having sat down across from him, without hesitation, having said, "We'll figure it out," like it was already decided. "How are you not?" he started. "Angry?" she said. She thought about it. "Honestly, I was," she said. "For years. The first 2 were, I was very angry. And now?" he said. "Now I'm tired of being angry," she said. "And you're sitting across from me." She looked at him. "I can be angry later. I've been angry for 10 years. I can do 10 more minutes without it." He looked at her. 10 more minutes, he said. Maybe 20, she said. He almost smiled. The beginning of one, the expression of someone being surprised by something they'd forgotten they were capable of. She saw it. She held on to it. Daniel, she said. Yeah, he said. What do you need? She said. Right now. In this booth, what do you need? He thought about it. The honest consideration. I don't know, he said. I've been thinking about this moment for 4 years and I didn't. I never got to what I actually needed. 4 years, she said. Since Dad, he said. She nodded. Then we have time to figure it out, she said. You've been thinking about it for 4 years. I've been thinking about it for 12. She looked at him. Between the two of us, we have 16 years of thinking about it. We'll get somewhere. He looked at her. At the specific dry logic of that. At his sister. At the person who had been looking at the face of every stranger in a crowd for 12 years and had finally found the right face in booth 7 on a Tuesday morning because he'd forgotten his rain jacket. 16 years, he said. 16 years, she said. He picked up the coffee she'd poured when she sat down. It was cold. He drank it anyway. She called Linda at 11:40. Not from the booth. From the back hallway, the specific in-between space behind the kitchen where the staff kept their bags and where Marcus had told her once that the phone reception was inexplicably better than anywhere else in the building. She'd asked Daniel to wait. He'd said yes. She'd looked at him for a moment before she left the booth, the specific, checking look of someone who wasn't sure the thing they were leaving would still be there when they got back. He understood. I'll be here, he said. She'd gone. She stood in the hallway with her phone in her hand for 2 minutes before she called, not because she didn't know what to say, because she knew what she was about to do to her mother, and she needed a moment to be the person who was about to do it. She was about to call her mother and say words that would restructure everything Linda Chen had understood about her Tuesday morning. She was about to give her mother something she'd been waiting 12 years for. And she was old enough to know that getting what you'd waited for was not always the simple thing people assumed it would be. It was sometimes harder than the waiting, because the waiting had a shape you'd learn to live inside. And the getting required a new shape. And new shapes took time. She called. Linda answered on the second ring. Sarah? The specific, slightly alert quality of a mother who received a mid-morning call from her daughter on a workday and was already doing the quick, automatic calculation of possible reasons. Hi, Mom, Sarah said. You're at work, Linda said. Yes, Sarah said. Is everything okay? Linda Sarah looked at the wall, at the staff schedule pinned to the corkboard, at the specific ordinary evidence of a Tuesday morning that had stopped being ordinary at 8:47. Mom, she said, I need to tell you something. Linda was quiet, not the quiet of someone who hadn't heard, the quiet of someone who was gathering herself. Okay, Linda said. I'm at work, Sarah said. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to sit down if you're not sitting down. I'm sitting, Linda said. She probably wasn't, but she said it. Mom, Sarah said. Daniel is here. Silence. The specific, complete silence of a phone line where someone has stopped breathing for a moment. What? Linda said, not a question. The single word of someone who had heard correctly and needed a moment before they could form a sentence. He's here, Sarah said, at the diner. He came in this morning. I recognized him. She paused. He's okay, Mom. He's sitting in booth 7 right now and he's okay. The silence continued. Sarah waited. She heard something on the other end of the line. Not crying. The sound of a person sitting down. Actually sitting down this time. Linda, she said. She didn't call her mother Linda. She'd never called her mother Linda. But it came out anyway. The instinct to use the most direct address when the most direct thing was happening. I'm here, Linda said. Her voice had changed. Not broken, changed. The specific fundamental shift in a voice when something that has been in tension for a very long time is released all at once. I'm here. I'm sitting. Good, Sarah said. He's okay, Sarah said. He's clean, Mom. 8 years, he's living here. He has a job. The silence again. Shorter this time. 8 years, Linda said. 8 years, Sarah said. He's been in Portland, Sarah said. 3 years. Another silence. Sarah let her mother sit in it. She'd sit in it herself later. Right now, her job was to be the steady one. She'd been the steady one before. She knew how. Does he want to see me? Linda said. The question came out small, not weak small. The specific size of a question that a person had been afraid to ask for a long time and was finally asking and needed to be small to get out. Sarah's chest did something. She pressed her back against the hallway wall. Yes, she said. You asked him, Linda said. I'm asking him, Sarah said. I wanted to talk to you first. Don't ask him, Linda said. Sarah looked at the wall. Mom, don't ask him, Linda said again. If you ask him, it becomes a question he has to answer. I don't want it to be a question. Her voice was steadier now, the steadiness of someone who had moved through the first wave and found ground underneath. Tell him. Tell him his mother would like to see him when he's ready. Not a question. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. And Sarah, Linda said. Yeah, Sarah said. Tell him. She stopped. Sarah waited. Tell him the soup is still the same, Linda said. He'll know what that means. Sarah looked at the corkboard, at the staff schedule, at the ordinary Tuesday morning that had stopped being ordinary. Okay, Mom, she said. Is he scared? Linda said. Sarah thought about Daniel in booth 7, about I don't know how to do this, about I've been thinking about this moment for 4 years, about cold, coffee drunk, anyway. I think so, she said. Tell him that's okay, Linda said. Tell him I'm scared too. Sarah pressed her hand flat against the wall. I'll tell him, she said. When? Linda said. I don't know, Sarah said. Today, if he's ready. If he's not, today, a hope stated plainly. I'll try, Sarah said. Sarah, Linda said. Yeah, Sarah said. You found him, Linda said. He came in, Sarah said. You found him, Linda said again. You've been looking since the beginning. You found him. Sarah looked at the hallway, at the specific unremarkable space where she'd made this call, at the corkboard and the staff schedule and the noise of the kitchen coming through the wall. Yeah, she said. Good, Linda said. Come home after your shift, both of you, if he's ready. If he's not, just you either way. Okay, Sarah said. And Sarah, Linda said. Yeah, Sarah said. Thank you, her mother said. Mom, just thank you, Linda said, for not stopping. Sarah stood in the hallway. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. She just stood there for a moment with the phone against her ear and the kitchen noise coming through the wall and 12 years of not stopping sitting in her chest like something that had just been named. I'll see you tonight, she said. She hung up. She stood there for another minute. Then she went back to booth 7. He was still there. She'd known he would be. She sat down across from him. She looked at him. She wants to see you, Sarah said. He looked at her. She said to tell you it's not a question, Sarah said. She wants to see you when you're ready. Not a question. Just when you're ready. He was quiet. She also said to tell you the soup is still the same, Sarah said. Something happened in his face. Not dramatic. The specific, private thing that happened when a particular detail landed in a particular place. He looked at the table. He was quiet for a long time. The soup, he said. Yes, Sarah said. She still makes it, he said. Every March 14th, Sarah said. And other times too. He nodded. He looked at the rain. At the window. At Portland in November doing what it did. She said she's scared too, Sarah said. She wanted you to know that. He looked at her. That sounds like her, he said. Yes, Sarah said. It does. He said, if you're ready, she said. After my shift. You could come to the apartment. He looked at the window. At the rain. What time does your shift end? He said. 3, she said. He looked at his hands. At the scar. At the specific, small shape of a moment 30 years ago that had brought him here. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. She flagged Marcus down. I need 20 more minutes, she said. Marcus looked at the booth, at Daniel, at Sarah. Take 30, he said. He walked away. Sarah looked at her brother. We have 30 minutes, she said. What do we do with 30 minutes? He said. She looked at him. Tell me something, she said. Tell me something I don't know about the last 12 years. Something small. Something that was good. He thought about it. The real consideration. Gene, he said. The man who gave me the first job. He taught me how to read a level. Said most people held it wrong their whole lives and never noticed because everything they built was slightly off and they just lived in the slightly off and thought it was straight. Sarah looked at him. He sounds like he was talking about other things, she said. He was always talking about other things, Daniel said. What happened to him? She said. Retired, Daniel said. Moved to Arizona. We still text sometimes. She looked at her brother. At 38 years old, who texted a retired contractor in Arizona. At the small life he'd said was his. At the specific, particular evidence of a person who had been building something, not just kitchens and bathrooms, himself, for 12 years. Good, she said. Yeah, he said. Tell me something else, she said. He told her. Her shift ended at 3:04. Not 3, she'd had a table come in at 2:50 that she couldn't leave mid-order. A family of 4, with the specific unhurried energy of people who had nowhere to be and didn't know she did. She'd taken their order. She'd smiled. She'd been aware of Daniel the whole time. He'd moved to the counter at noon when the booth was needed, had sat there for 3 hours drinking coffee that Marcus kept refilling without being asked, reading something on his phone, existing in the diner with the specific unobtrusive patience of someone who had said he'd be there and was being there. She'd checked on him twice. He'd nodded both times. That was enough. They walked to her car, side by side, not talking. The rain had stopped sometime in the early afternoon and left the specific, washed quality of a Portland street after rain. The colors slightly more saturated, the air slightly cleaner, the city looking briefly like a better version of itself. She unlocked the car. They got in. She sat for a moment without starting it. You okay? She said. No, he said. Good, she said. Me neither. She started the car. The apartment was 11 minutes away. She'd mapped it again that morning. Not to the apartment, from the diner to the courthouse for Diana's hearing, but she'd thought about the apartment and the distance and the specific, coincidental geography of a city that had contained all of them for 3 years without knowing. 11 minutes. She drove slowly, not because she was scared, because she wanted to give him time. He was looking out the window, at Portland, at the city he'd been living in for 3 years from a different angle. I drove past this street, he said, at the second light. When? She said. Last spring, he said. Job's site 2 blocks over. I drove past this street 3 times. She looked at the street, at the apartment building visible at the end of it. She gardens in the back, Sarah said. You can't see it from here. I know, he said. I looked it up on Google Maps once. The satellite view. She looked at him. You looked at her garden on Google Maps, she said. Yes, he said. Daniel, she said. I know, he said. She turned back to the road. She drove. The roses are along the back fence, she said. She planted them the year after Dad died. She talks to them. He looked at her. She talks to them, he said. She says they grow better when someone talks to them. Sarah said. I asked her if that was true. She said it was true for her. He looked at the window at the city. That sounds like her, he said. Everything sounds like her, Sarah said. She hasn't changed the way people change. She's changed the way water changes. Same thing, different form. He was quiet. She parked outside the building. She turned off the engine. Neither of them moved. What if she... He started. She won't, Sarah said. You don't know what I was going to say, he said. You were going to say, what if she can't forgive me, Sarah said. Or what if she looks at me differently? Or what if 12 years has made me into someone she doesn't recognize? She looked at him. Whatever version of that question you had, the answer is the same. What's the answer? He said. She set your place at the table for 12 years, Sarah said. She covered your food and left it until morning. She planted roses and talked to them. She paused. She's been loving you continuously for 12 years, Daniel. That doesn't stop because you walked through the door. He looked at the building, at the 3rd floor. At the window he might be able to see from here if he knew which one. He didn't know which one. I'm not the same person, he said. She's not expecting the same person, Sarah said. She's expecting her son. Those aren't always the same thing, he said. No, she said. But they're not as different as you think. He looked at the window. I don't know how to walk in, he said. Yes, you do, she said. Sarah, You walked into a diner this morning, she said. You sat down. You stayed. She looked at him. You know how to walk in. You've been doing it all day. He looked at her. At his sister. At 34 years old, who had found him by a scar and sat down across from him without hesitation and had spent 6 hours giving him time and information and 30 minutes of good stories and was now parked outside their mother's building, telling him he knew how to walk through a door. What if I can't do it today? He said. Then we come back tomorrow, she said. And if I can't tomorrow, he said. We come back the day after, she said. Daniel, I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. We have time. He looked at the building. What if I need a minute? He said. Take it, she said. He took it. He took 4 minutes. She sat with him. Not talking, the specific companionable silence of two people who had run out of things to say that could help, and had decided that being there was its own form of helping. At minute 4, he opened the door. She opened hers. They walked to the building together. She buzzed the apartment. 3 seconds. Linda's voice came through the intercom. Yes? The voice of someone who had been waiting by the intercom, or near it, or in the same room as it. Sarah said, It's us. The door buzzed open immediately. No pause. No question. Just the door opening. Linda was standing in the hallway when they came out of the elevator. Not at the apartment door. In the hallway, 10 feet from the elevator, the specific positioning of someone who had decided the hallway was close enough and had been standing there long enough that she'd had to make a choice about where to wait, and this was the choice she'd made. She was 64 years old. She was smaller than Daniel remembered. Not the way Sarah had described, not carefully small, just smaller than the version of her he'd been carrying. He'd been carrying the version from 12 years ago. She'd lived 12 years since then. They all had. She was looking at him. He was looking at her. Sarah stopped between them. Then she stepped aside. Not far, 2 steps. Enough to make space without leaving. Linda looked at her son. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry immediately. She made it 4 seconds. Daniel crossed the hallway in 3 steps. He put his arms around her. She was smaller than he remembered. He held on anyway. She held on back. Not crying, beyond crying. The specific total thing that happened when you had been waiting for something for 12 years. And it arrived, and it was real, and it was here, and your body didn't know what to do with real after so long with absent. She held on. He held on. Sarah stood 2 steps away. She looked at the hallway ceiling. She was not going to cry in the hallway. She was absolutely going to cry in the hallway. She cried in the hallway. They went inside. Linda's apartment was exactly as Daniel would have predicted and entirely different from what he'd expected. The furniture was the same. The couch, the chair by the window, the kitchen table with the 4 chairs, even though it was only the 2 of them. 4 chairs. He looked at the 4 chairs. He looked at Linda. She was looking at, sit down, she said. I'll make tea. He sat. Sarah sat. Linda went to the kitchen. He could hear her filling the kettle. The specific familiar sound of his mother making tea, the water, the click of the electric kettle, the sound of cabinet doors that stuck slightly in the same places they'd always stuck. He looked at the table, at the 4 chairs, at the specific quiet faith of a woman who had kept 4 chairs at a table for 2. He thought about the birthday dinners, about March 14th, about 12 covered plates, about dumplings and scallion pancakes and soup that took 2 days, about a place set for someone who wasn't there, about how long you had to believe in something before the believing itself became a form of the thing you believed in. He thought about that for a long time. Linda came back with 3 cups. She set one in front of him. She sat down. She looked at him. He looked at her. Hi, Mom, he said. 2 words, the same 2 words he'd said to Sarah 6 hours ago, except different. Everything about them different. Hi, baby, she said. She hadn't called him that since he was 20. He was 38 years old, and she called him baby, and it was the most correct thing anyone had said all day. He picked up the tea. It was the same tea, the same brand, the same smell, the specific particular comfort of something unchanged. He drank it. Linda watched him drink it. Sarah watched both of them. The kitchen was quiet. The apartment was quiet. Outside Portland was doing what it did. Inside, three people who had been missing pieces of each other for 12 years were sitting at a table with four chairs and not saying anything because there was too much to say, and they had time and they were going to take it. The soup was made on a Sunday, not March 14th, a Sunday in November, 3 weeks after the Tuesday in the diner. Linda had called Sarah on Saturday evening. Tomorrow, she'd said. The soup? Soup, Sarah had said. The soup, Linda had said. Sarah had called Daniel. Sunday, she'd said. Yes, she'd said. He'd been quiet for a moment. What time? He'd said. Noon, she'd said. Okay, he'd said. The 3 weeks had not been simple, not because anything had gone wrong. Nothing had gone wrong, not in the specific dramatic way that things went wrong in the versions she'd imagined over the years. No confrontations, no ultimatums, no moments where someone said something that couldn't be unsaid. Just the specific slow work of three people figuring out how to be in each other's lives after 12 years of not being. Daniel had come back to the apartment twice in the first week. The first time he'd stayed 2 hours. He and Linda had talked, not about the 12 years, not yet, about smaller things. His work, her garden, the neighborhood, the specific careful conversation of people who were testing the ground before they put weight on it. He'd left at 8. Linda had called Sarah at 8:15. He left, she'd said. I know, Sarah had said. Is that okay? Yes, Linda had said. He'll come back. How do you know? Sarah had said. Because he came the first time, Linda had said. The first time is the hardest. She'd been right. He'd come back Thursday. He'd stayed 3 hours. He'd helped Linda with something in the garden, a section of the back fence that needed restaking, the roses pulling it down with their weight. He'd fixed it without being asked, and she'd brought him tea afterward. And they'd sat in the garden in the November cold, because Linda was the kind of person who sat in her garden regardless of temperature. And Daniel had apparently decided he was the kind of person who sat in gardens with his mother. Sarah had heard about it from both of them independently. Linda's version, he fixed the fence. He knows what he's doing with his hands. Daniel's version, she talks to the roses while you're right there. Like you're not there. Like it's just her and the roses. Sarah had not told Daniel what Linda talked to the roses about. That felt like something Linda could tell him herself, when it was time. He'd asked about their father on the second visit. Not directly, the way he asked things that mattered, obliquely, approaching from the side. What was he like? Daniel had said. At the end. He was himself, Linda had said. All the way to the end. He was making eggs. Scrambled? Daniel had said. He always made them too dry, Linda had said. I know, Daniel had said. I used to eat them anyway. I know, Linda had said. I watched you. They'd been quiet. He knew you were okay, Linda had said. I want you to know that. I don't know how he knew, but he did. He said it once, the last year. He said, Daniel is okay. He's just not ready. Daniel had looked at her. He said that, he'd said. Yes, Linda had said. I don't know what he based it on. He just said it. He was right, Daniel had said. He usually was, Linda had said. Sarah had heard this from Linda afterward. She'd sat with it for a long time. She thought about her father, about Thomas Chen, who had made scrambled eggs too dry and had closed certain to survive, and had said, in the last year of his life, Daniel is okay. He's just not ready. She thought about what it meant to know something without evidence. To just know. She thought about the scar, about knowing without evidence, about the body carrying certainty before the mind caught up. Maybe it ran in the family. Sunday. She arrived at noon. Daniel was already there. He'd arrived at 11:30. She knew because Linda had texted her at 11:32. He's here. Early. Bring wine. She'd brought wine. The apartment smelled like the soup. Not like a soup, like this soup. The specific particular smell of pork and tofu, and the spices her mother combined in a way she'd never written down because she'd never needed to write it down. The combination living in her hands the way certain things lived in hands that had done them for long enough. Daniel was at the kitchen table. Linda was at the stove. The specific domestic arrangement of a Sunday afternoon that looked like it had been happening for years and had been happening for 3 weeks. Wine, Sarah said. Put it on the counter. Linda said without turning around. Sarah put it on the counter. She sat across from Daniel. He looked at her. You're late, he said. I'm exactly on time, she said. I was here at 11:30, he said. You were early, she said. I was nervous, he said. You were here last Thursday, she said. The soup is different, he said. She looked at him. The soup is different, she said. It's the soup, he said. It's the specific one. She looked at Linda's back, at her mother at the stove making the soup she made on March 14th every year, making it in November because her son was here and it was time. Yeah, Sarah said. I get that. They ate at one. The dumplings first, then the scallion pancakes, then the soup. Linda had made too much of everything, the specific, deliberate excess of someone who was feeding people after a long time of not being able to feed them and was not going to run out. Nobody mentioned that. They just ate. The table was quiet in the good way. The way that happened when people were eating something that deserved attention and were giving it attention. Daniel ate the soup slowly. He was looking at the bowl. At some point, he looked up at Linda. It's the same, he said. I told you, she said. You told Sarah to tell me, he said. Same thing, she said. He looked at his bowl. No, he said. It's not. She looked at him. No, she said. I suppose it's not. They looked at each other across the table, at the specific, enormous thing sitting between them that they hadn't addressed directly yet and might not address directly for some time, because some things needed more than 3 weeks of groundwork. But they were looking at it together. That was different from not looking at it. After dinner, Linda went to her room and came back with something. A photograph. She put it on the table between Daniel and Sarah. The three of them at a beach. Daniel maybe 12. Sarah 8. Thomas behind them with his hand on Daniel's shoulder. Linda had taken the photograph. You couldn't see her in it. I found it last week, Linda said. In the box. Daniel picked it up. He looked at his father's hand on his shoulder. At 8-year-old Sarah, squinting into the sun with the specific, unflattering squint of a child who had been told to look at the camera and had looked slightly to the left of it. At himself at 12. At whoever 12-year-old Daniel Chen had been before everything that came after. I remember this, he said. Cannon Beach, Linda said. You just learned to boogie board. I was terrible at it, he said. You were, Linda said. You kept falling off and getting back on. I don't remember getting back on, he said. You did, she said. Every time. He looked at the photograph. He put it down in the middle of the table, where all three of them could see it. Can I keep this? He said. I made you a copy, Linda said. She went to the counter. She came back with an envelope. She handed it to him. He opened it. The same photograph. Printed at the pharmacy. She'd printed it before she knew he was coming. Before the diner, before the rain, before booth 7. She'd printed it because March 14th was coming, and she'd been looking through the box and she'd thought, he should have this. And she'd printed it. For whenever. Mom, Daniel said. I printed a few things, Linda said. From the box, in case. She sat down. I've been printing things from the box for years. In case. Daniel looked at the envelope. At his mother. At 64 years old, who had been printing photographs from a box for years, in case her son came back. Who had kept 4 chairs at a table for 2. Who had covered food and left it until morning. Who had talked to roses. Who had kept the soup exactly the same. Mom, he said again. Don't, she said. I need to, not today, she said. Today we eat and we look at photographs and we have wine. She looked at him. The other conversations will come. They need to come. But not today. He looked at her. Okay, she said. Sarah opened the wine. She poured 3 glasses. She put one in front of each of them. She picked hers up. She looked at her brother. She looked at her mother. At the photograph in the middle of the table. At the 4 chairs all occupied. At the soup bowls not yet cleared. At the specific, ordinary evidence of a Sunday afternoon that had taken 12 years to arrive. To Dad, she said. Linda picked up her glass. Daniel picked up his. To Dad, Linda said. To Dad, Daniel said. They drank March 14th. Daniel arrived at 11. Not because Linda had asked him to come early. Because he'd been awake since 6. And had driven around Portland for 2 hours. And had ended up parked outside the building at 10:45. and had decided that waiting in the car was less honest than going up. Linda opened the door before he knocked. She'd heard the elevator. "You're early," she said. "I know," he said. She stepped back. He came in. The apartment smelled like the soup. It had been simmering since yesterday. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the stove, at the pot, at the specific rising steam of something that had been made the same way for longer than he'd been gone. "Can I help?" he said. She looked at him. "The dumplings," she said. "I was about to start." She handed him an apron. He put it on. She showed him how she folded them. He'd watched her do it 100 times as a child. He'd forgotten. She showed him again. His first three were wrong. She fixed them without comment. His fourth was better. His fifth was right. She looked at it. "There," she said. They stood at the counter, folding dumplings, not talking, the kitchen doing what kitchens did. Sarah arrived at noon. She stood in the doorway. She looked at her mother and her brother at the counter, at the apron, at the dumplings lined up on the tray. She didn't say anything. She took off her coat. She washed her hands. She stood beside Daniel. "Show me," she said. He showed her. Her first three were wrong. He fixed them without comment. They ate at one. The four chairs, three of them. Thomas's chair was not empty. It held what it had always held. Everything he'd left behind, which was considerable. Subscribe if you're new. Share this tonight with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments. Who are you still looking for? I read everyone. See you in the next story.